What's up, gamers? It's your boy at the Beef Theft back at it again with another awesome art vid. So this time around, I'm making like a stone door frame, so I could reuse the door that I made in the last video, and I can put it in other places in my mod kit, so it goes to the rampart and stuff like that for the castle. And like a lot of the other things that I make when they're hard surface, I just started making the base, like the shape of the archway in Max. Added a little bit of geometry and then just brought it over to ZBrush where I started fine detailing and adding all the rest of the, I guess, bevels and edges to try and make it feel more like a rock. So as you guys might have seen, there was a fair bit of going back and forth, trying new things out. So I did start using the trim dynamic brush just to get those bevels, get it feeling like a stone, but I wasn't liking the result and it looked a little too muddied, like all these shapes, if it made any sense. And I realized my problem was that everything was too smooth from the geometry that I had added in Max. So I went and with the, I think it's trim curve brush or selection thing, made the front flat as how I guess cut stone might be, and then just started messing up all the edges slightly, because it's very easy to overdo the detail here, and it's important to one, stick to the reference, and two, just make things subtle, because if you make something too intense, like detail wise or too recognizable, like I said in, I don't think it's the first or second 3D video, it's going to be very easy for the user to detect what exactly is going on as far as like where it's repeating like all your patterns. For this video, I actually had a fair bit of technical difficulties. So at some points, it looks like, I guess, things are being restarted over, and that's because my program crashed. I'm pretty sure that's because, well, one, the nature of these programs, they tend to crash a lot. When I was in school, they would always say, whenever you remember that the program can crash, save. And that's something that I don't always do. I'm just like, nah, it's fine. It's not gonna crash, but it crashes sometimes. Um, as far as I'm aware, a lot of those things happen because of memory. So ZBrush is a very memory-intensive program. And I think while I was doing this, I had 3ds Max open as well as Krita, and I think I also had a Substance to like texture it, and Unreal where I was testing out my assets. So wherever like these longer chunks where you don't see any weird cuts, it's because I closed most of those programs so that I could keep sculpting without being interrupted. So as some of you may know that are following me in different, I guess my social media platforms, I post some of these things or links to these videos in like Twitter and Instagram. And I think it was in Instagram that I got a question about like what software specifically I'm using. This is called ZBrush, and I have like the perpetual license, so I could basically monetize anything that I make on it, no problem. Um, but the software is kind of expensive. I got it while I was going through school because I needed it. The ZBrush has this other version of it. I think it's called Sculptures Pro or something like that. That does not have all the features, but it's pretty close. Beyond that, I've heard a lot of people talk really good things about Blender and its new sculpting features. So if you're looking to get into one of those things, I recommend either trying Sculptors or Blender and see where you go. I mean, you're not really gonna lose anything other than time, right? Alright, so in this part you saw me, so I had all the bricks separated in different subtools, which they call subtools here, but they make more sense as like a layer. So think of it like a Photoshop layer. And the reason I do that is so I could sculpt things uninterrupted and things don't overlap, because the program takes into account what's above it and what's below it when you're sculpting, so things can get really janky. Um, what I ended up doing here was mirroring in like the one side that I did, just tweaking it a little bit, and then just adding it back together using my original model as a reference. That way I know it's the correct measurements. And after that, you saw like this other bigger arch kind of come about, and that's because in reality I needed to do two arches, right? So one for the door that I already made, another one for like a doorway tunnel type thing, I guess it's kind of like a bridge, but it's not really a bridge. You'll see it like towards the end, so that'll make a little bit more sense. But it's the same general idea. And I mean, while yes, I could have used most of the rocks that I did on the original one and only do like the top side, I was actually kind of having a decent amount of fun just getting to sculpt all these blemishes and details on the rocks. So I mean, seeing as how I had the time, it was a pretty good idea, and it was a lot of fun. It's so some of you may or may not be aware of why I'm doing these type of things. So I'm doing it to make this modular environment that's like kind of fishing medieval village type deal with like castle walls and stuff. And the aim is to get a really good portfolio piece and to make it game ready or so it can run in real time. And what real time means is basically any cool effects or basically anything in the scene that you can play a game without it like really affecting. It's kind of self-explanatory because it's real time. It's not like a screenshot that takes like a million years to render. Just things have to be working as you're going in. Um, Here you can see me trying to do a little bit of cracks, and I've been experimenting a lot. So there's this brush set called Orb Brush, I believe. I'm not too sure on who made it, but you can just look up Orb Brush set for ZBrush, and you'll find them, and they're free. And a lot of people use them throughout the industry, as far as I understand. Like people from Insomniac and all those other big studios too. People like me that just like making these type of things for fun and for portfolio purposes. What I've been trying to deviate from them because the way some of those work, they're like stamps, right? So the stamp does help get you where you need to be, I get in a sense of like getting that look. But I want to practice myself a little bit more so maybe I can simulate and emulate some of those effects. And maybe I just haven't experimented with those brushes enough, but I feel like I have a little bit more control doing it myself by hand. So in this next part, I got the two arches done. And what I'm doing is trying to dynamesh them together to see if I can just, I don't know if the word is cheat, but like make my workflow easy by making the low poly in ZBrush. And I'm sure there's a better way of doing it in ZBrush, but I mainly use ZBrush for making the high poly. And I'm not too used to this like low poly workflow, so part of this is just experimenting and see where it gets me. Ultimately, I end up not being too happy with the way that I guess I managed to reduce the polys to ZBrush. So I just ended up, I guess, taking the high poly to max and just doing the low poly render in max, right? So there's like some periods of time where it looks like I'm just waiting, chilling, and most of that is that the program. So I try to reduce the poly so that Max doesn't crash when I bring things in, right? So you gotta do this thing called Decimation Master, and what Decimation Master does is that it computes your whole mesh, whatever compute really means. I think it just means that it kind of figures out how many polys you got and how to best, I guess, decimate them, and decimate them in this like sense means turn it into, instead of being quads, which is the quadratic sort of polygons, into triangles and make it as optimal as possible while still retaining the shape, meaning making it the least amount of geometry possible while still retaining shape, right? So that's what it does a little bit. I usually hit it with like decimation master pre-process current, which you have to do, and then I just start messing around with like percentages of decimation. So it has like anywhere from, well, I think default is 20, but you can go higher if you want, I guess, more polys. But I usually start like at 20 and then keep going back and forth until I have what I like. Lately for this project, I've been doing like 1 or 2% decimation, and it seemed to work out fine. So okay, here in Max, what I'm doing is called UV unwrapping. And UV unwrapping, think of it like getting a paper box and I guess printing a paper box template in a sheet of paper and then folding it to place, and so you can make your, I guess, cube, right? So that's basically what I'm doing here in 3D, and that is done so that whenever I texture this asset, all the nothing gets stretched weirdly, and all this green pattern you're seeing is basically a checkerboard that has like coordinates, and it lets you know whether or not the texture is stretched. And when it's stretched, it looks like that gnarly rainbow pattern, and you want it to be those tiny squares. You can affect the tiling of it so they can be bigger squares, but I just would rather work like this for some reason. Um, and it's I don't know why, but I haven't been able to figure out how to capture the window that does all the UVs. So right now I'm sure it just looks like a wild clicking of the mouse floating over the left corner, and things are happening. So what happens when you UV unwrap an object is this little window pops up that basically has everything in a wireframe and allows you to do all this, I guess, flattening out the geometry so you can see better. All right, so now we're Unreal. So I usually like test all my assets in whatever engine I'm using it. And here I'm just showing you the old door that I made first. Next, the big arch for that weird bridge thing I was talking about. And lastly, I'm gonna go show you that big arch. No, I guess like the stone frame for the walls that makes me able to reuse the assets as much as possible. And here I'm just showing the picture and then like a zoom in so you can get an idea of what I'm doing. Like the aim of doing a market is to reuse as much as possible and to I guess just make it as efficient as possible so you can get more bang for your buck, I guess you could say. Well, alrighty then, guys. So I took you through my whole process of making these stone frames for the one for the door and the other one for the little bridge thing. And take you over everything from almost everything because some of my footage got corrupted. So the initial making the, I guess, stone pattern, it got corrupted for whatever reason. I still gotta figure that out because it's been happening way more than I would like. Um, so doing the initial, then taking it to ZBrush, sculpting the high detail, decimating it so it's lower poly, and bringing it to Max or whatever other software that you guys want to use, and UV unwrapping it and baking textures, which I think maybe in a later video, I might show you guys how I bake textures. So there's a couple ways of doing it. And like everything in 3D is like, there's a million ways to do it, but there's not like a definite, this is the right or this is the wrong way. There's just different methodologies. So I'm gonna show you guys in later on video. But yeah, so I bake textures and then for the texturing itself, it's exact same thing that I was doing for everything else. I used my smart material that I created a while ago when I started this project, so everything will stay consistent. Just clicked and dragged it, and make sure to highlight the edges as best as I could. Well, yeah, so that's gonna be it for today's video. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions or just wanna drop by and say howdy, feel free to do so in the comments. All right, catch you guys later. Bye.